that when you're using a version of reinforcement and you're doing it wrong, you're creating way more lasting behaviors that are like way harder to get rid of than if you just use punishment incorrectly 1 or 2 times.
Dig a little deeper.
Welcome to the podcast, guys. Today we're having a crossover episode with David. Actually, we didn't invite him. He just showed up.
Yeah.
He forced his way onto our podcast. What do you have to say for yourself?
Here I am. What are we talking about, Michelle?
You know, it's a good...
Also, I would like to make it known that I am the guest. This is not a crossover episode.
Oh my gosh.
This is the Miracle Canine show with special guest David Turpak of the David the Dog Trainer podcast, which is not the same as a crossover episode.
What? How is it not the same as a crossover episode?
It's not.
You act as if we don't see each other all the time.
Would imply creative collaboration prior to the filming of the episode to merge the best of both worlds.
As if I didn't ask you 5 times. What do you guys think we should talk about on this episode? The collaboration attempt was there.
Yeah.
Okay? The attempt was there.
Yeah.
Wow, guys, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're right. How's everybody's week been?
You know, training dogs.
Yeah.
Right?
Training dogs?
Another day of training dogs.
Living the life.
Bridget, do you have any new board and trains?
Yeah, I have a lot of newborn trains. I have a German short hair pointer.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
You always love those.
Yes, yeah. Her name is Tilly. She's a good girl.
Have you ever told your full German short-haired pointer backstory story on the Miracle Canine show?
I think you've like hinted, like
Yeah.
you've told bits and pieces, but you
Yeah.
haven't given us the whole.
Well, how about we start there, Bridget?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So my family raised and bred German short hair pointers under their kennel name Scarecrow Kennels. And I was the kennel manager for many years. And I helped raise the puppies, socialize the puppies, and get them ready for adoption. And my uncle and I would go out to the fields of like Utah and Colorado and just run the dogs. And that sparked my interest in dog training a lot. Because he had those radio collars that...
Oh, yeah.
like that has a really long antenna. Mm-hmm. So he was starting to use those. And I just became very curious with like early puppy stages and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. And we did the NAVDA, just like I think North American hunting. And my dog at the time got a prize 3 in her hunting certification. They took off points because her paw was fucked up. So,
Well, because when you say that, like he was starting to use some of the different like electronic collars, like modern e-collar training, when did that really hit its like groove? Because it's not been around.
no, I think within the last
long.
like 10 years, I would say.
Yeah. I know prior to that, like a lot of the people I've talked to that have trained for like decades and decades and decades, they're the like first e-collars they would use were like you would set the setting on the collar itself and then you just like hit a button.
Yeah.
And there was like no adjustability
Yeah.
to it or like anything like that.
I like from those days, I just remember like how happy the dogs looked, like running on a prairie and just living their best lives. And he only used the e-collar for recall. So,
Yeah.
And then we would do like duck hunting and we'd like do terrible things to ducks. Not really. But they would like tape their wings so they couldn't like fly anywhere. And if you were not a good hunter, you would leave the bird there. But we always like cut the tape off and let the bird go.
Yeah.
But still, like it's like teaching a dog to hold something in its mouth like softly and not like puncture it.
Yeah.
So he like raised his own quail and ducks, and there's a lot of ducks in his freezer for like drags. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot like intro to scent work almost too.
Are pointers like pointers, but then also retrievers? Like, do they do both?
Mm-hmm. They're gun dogs.
Okay. So like they flush out the dogs or the birds,
Yeah.
and then once they're shot, they also go get them and bring them back.
Yeah, they point at first when they sense the dog, and then you're supposed to like be alerted that there's a bird or whatever. in your vicinity and then shoot it. So we would like shoot clay pigeons, and I would like shoot guns out in the prairie with him. Really nice time.
That is cool.
Yeah.
What age range was that for you?
I was, when I first went down there, I was like 14, and then maybe 22.
Okay.
So,
Nice. For some reason I thought maybe you were younger, but that's very cool.
I have a hunting dog book at my house that I started reading like probably last year before, something like that. And it's old. It's from like the 40s or something like that. And I remember I read the first like 3 chapters of it. And yeah, they were talking about basically in the training process as you're teaching the dogs to do these things, the ways that they would simulate flushing the birds, but making sure the birds didn't actually fly away by like having them basically tied back to stuff so they could only fly so far. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like obviously now with modern technology, like I'm sure you could create artificial things that simulate the same thing where you don't have to like risk the animal for it. But back then it's like, how else are you going to do it?
Yeah. Or even like with like drug detection dogs, instead of using like the real drugs these days, now they can use like the
synthetics.
Synthetic stuff and everything.
A lot of people will claim, like a lot of your real police canine trainers and stuff will claim though that the synthetics still don't get the same hit off of the dogs. So like when you get into a lot of like actual police canine trainers and stuff, they'll use actual narcotics still to train a lot of those types of things.
Even some of the old techniques they would use for like the retrieving aspect of it and like making them have like a soft mouth are like so unethical.
And the punishment, like a big punishment for hunting dogs, like was pulling their ears like really hard as a correction.
Pulling their ears?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
pulling their ears real hard.
Like I remember talking to a guy and he said that
so
they
sad.
would use wood and if a dog had a really hard mouth, they would hammer nails into it so the top of the nails stood out, so if they chomped on it, it would hurt.
Yeah.
I'm like, we've come so far in a lot of these techniques.
Yeah. Like even back then, like my uncle was trying to make the dogs not gun shy because he bred them for like hunting. So we'd be going shooting guns at like 8-week-old puppies, 8-week-old puppies, and then just get them conditioned to the sound of a gun going off or riding in the car because those were things that they had to do.
Yeah.
I think sometimes like the one area of hunting dogs that I think is like a very valuable skill for general pet dogs is like the noise desensitization that they do where they have these dogs and they just have them hang out on the gun range and, you know, do stuff with like starter pistols and stuff. And, you know, I've thought before about like, I used to have a starter pistol back when I used to do protection work. And I thought about getting one again to like start to condition certain noise sensitive dogs to like really explosive loud noises.
I mean, we
like
do
that.
live in Cleveland, so
Yeah.
it's not uncommon hearing gunshots.
Yeah. But I think that is an area where it's like, you know, sometimes you play this balance of, you know, with noise phobic dogs, like helping them overcome the hurdles, but by like almost incrementally and like very strategically adding in noise, where sometimes they do just need to get used to like the one out of nowhere ridiculously loud burst, right? And it's like some of those things, like you can only avoid them for so long, where if you address them head on with some dogs, you wonder like how much better some of their training, you know, could get with those types of things.
I was like, when we were, that Vizsla I was just talking about is going to be a bird dog. We went to Home Depot for his last lesson and we're walking around and we walked by one of the big like metal cart things. Yeah. And I had the dog at that point, and as soon as we walked by, he grabbed it and he just slammed it on the ground, and it made this huge clank noise right behind her, and she like scooted forward real fast. And then we just kept walking like nothing happened. And he's like, I just do stuff like that every once in a while. Make sure she gets used to it. Like, that's the way to do it, though. I mean,
it's a balance because like you don't like you have to be very intentional about it if you're going to do something like that, because you have to be prepared for the dog to have an adverse reaction to it and prepared to help the dog overcome it. Where some people get so willy-nilly with like they do just randomly do shit like that all the time, but they're in no position to actually help the dog overcome it. So you wind up just like freaking the dog out and having them constantly at the edge of their seat. Like, I never know when something ridiculously scary is going to happen, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting idea of there's like a lot of the stuff, even like with handling that we do, I think if people do it, but they don't do it with the overarching concept of pushing through until like compliance and acceptance, it doesn't work.
100%.
Yeah. So it's like, just like making random noises with a dog isn't going to automatically make them okay with it. So, like you have to have like you have to know how to get to the point of like acceptance for it.
Yeah. Like I use the example a lot of like when we do our handling drills, like a lot of it is, like just persistence and working past the problem and a little bit of kind of physical manipulation of getting the dog used to giving way to being like restrained and stuff. And a lot of people will look at that and they'll be like, oh, but like when I go to the vet restrains the dog and gets the job done. But the problem is the entire time they're restraining the dog, there's no pressure and release to it, right? There's no understanding of when the dog gives in, we give in a little bit. The dog is generally fighting the vet the entire time the procedure is happening. Yeah. So in their mind, even by the end of it, even if it took 10 minutes and they got the nails done or got the vaccines done, in the dog's mind, the dog fight through the whole thing. And then at the end of it, they were still fighting and the owner stopped or the vet stopped, right? Yeah. So, there is so much more technique to those types of methods than just literally making it happen. Yeah. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, especially with the puppies that we get in for the puppy program with the private lessons and we start working on it with handling, I'm like, at this point, the goal is not to complete the task. The goal is to get the dog comfortable with the task happening. 100%. So just because you finish brushing them, if we're doing a brushing drill, and maybe the dog's really good, but in the last 5 minutes, they start biting at you again, or they start fussing about it. Well, now we have to keep going until we hit a good phase again. Even if you're technically done, you can't be done. It's like the point of the matter at that point.
Socialization with people is another one that's similar to that. And I think as trainers... Oh, hang on. Let me gather my thoughts with this. Like, let's look at something like on-leash greetings with a person. I think it's a little different with a dog, right? But with a person, are on-leash greetings the most detrimental thing if you know exactly what you're doing? Not necessarily, right? We could get the dog used to people approaching them and interacting with them. And even if they don't like it, making sure that they understand that, fighting or reacting or things like that don't work. And ultimately, you probably could improve on your dog's social skills going about socializing them out and about. The problem is most people are not going to be aware enough or confident enough where when they are interacting with the dog, if they get some of that pushback or get some of that attitude, to know how to kind of push through it enough where the dog overcomes it and then excels, where they're just going to wind up making it worse. So that's why there's like some rules like that. We have to make those blanket, like, don't do this, even though technically, like with young dogs, we do need to get people interacting with them and petting them. But if you do it improperly and it's such a fine line, you're just going to do more harm than good,
Yeah, like there's two I can think of right now, actually, that I had similar conversations with the owners of them and for different reasons. One was a puppy, a burner puppy, who was like very fearful of new people, and she was very young, and it was causing a lot of issues at the vet, and the owners were really worried about it, and all this kind of stuff, very avoidant. And so we did, Maisie, you worked with her a couple of times where I asked you to just like grab the leash and like hang out with her for a little bit in lessons. And so I talked her through, because I do think to a certain extent with young puppies, kind of forcing them to have interactions with humans can kind of be beneficial if you're doing it with intention of like working through it. And it has to be a specific kind of dog, but with her, I knew she would benefit from it. So I told her, I was like, you can have people, like if you have guests come over, friends, family, whatever, you can basically like hand them Maisie's leash, have them sit down and just make them like pull Maisie over to them and basically be like, Maisie, you're not allowed to avoid this person. Like you have to hang out with them. But I told her, I was like, you can only have people do that you're confident are going to like persist through it. Yes. And that's the really, really key part, because if they like eventually are like, oh, I feel bad, like I don't want to, never mind. I'm like, your problem is going to be exponentially worse, because now she's learning how to fight that and then eventually get what she wants. Yeah. And then the other one was a German Shepherd mix that is really bad with vet visits and handling and nail trims and stuff like that. and we've been working on it. And the owners were like, oh, like we could have, you know, a friend do this where they're grabbing his feet and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, only if your friend is okay with him trying to bite them and still doing it.
Yeah.
I said, because yes, like, sure, it would benefit him if everyone, you know, did this to him, but you're not going to have an array of people jumping at the opportunity to have a dog muzzle punch them when they grab their foot and then persist through it to the point of success.
Yeah.
So you have to be picky on like who you're asking to do those things with your dogs and be confident that they're actually going to know what they're doing.
It's like even like your significant other, like we foster dogs all the time, so we pretty much have a steady flow of like a foster. And just watching Justin like interact with the dog, sometimes he like does everything wrong.
You haven't trained him not to do that yet?
I have many times, but like I told you that funny story. Like I asked him to take that foster Boots for a walk.
Yeah.
And I look out my window and Boots is dragging Justin down the street, like fully dragging him.
Bless him.
And then he got bitten by a foster a couple weeks ago because he's just picked the dog up, and he's like, I thought all dogs like to be picked up. It's like, no.
Justin.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So it's like sometimes I instruct him just not to do anything. So because he's not going to persist.
Yeah.
Yeah. With situations like that and with dogs that are having issues like that, it's almost, I tell people, I'm like, it's better to not do it at all than to try and fail. Because the more you attempt and then you give up and then attempt and then you give up, the more it just kind of bolsters their confidence with resisting it.
That's why we talk about less is more with those types of things anyways.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather you find one or two people you trust to help you overcome some of those hurdles, get past the problem with them, allow the dog to be successful with it, then try to do it with a gazillion people and have like a 50% success rate and never get anywhere with it. Whether that's introducing your dog to other dogs, right? Whether that's introducing your dog to new people, like anything like that, you know, less is more with all of those things.
I agree.
So what the heck, guys? Why did you decide this was the time to invite me onto the podcast? How many episodes in are you?
81.
That's a shit ton. I was telling Dave today when I had him on my podcast that you guys were going to have me on today, and I was like, yeah, I think they're like 80 something episodes in. So
I didn't know we had that many.
No.
That's a ton.
That's alarming.
When you really look at that,
how many stupid things have I said over 81 episodes?
Right? 45 minutes each, you'll say. Like, what is that? Like 26, that was that 60 hours of time collectively that you guys have talked on a fucking camera.
Yeah.
See, we don't train dogs. We just talk into
sit
microphones.
60 hours. My math could be horribly wrong on that, by the way.
That sounds
but
right.
I think 45. How many hours is that? Paige? Do the math.
What? Our podcasts are almost usually an hour long, aren't they?
Yeah, we're going to conservatively say 45 minutes, though, to make up for short ones.
How many hours did you say?
I said 60 hours.
You're right.
Yes.
Nice. Nailed it.
It's impressive, though.
Yeah, I don't know. We were just feeling not bored. Just like we had to expand our horizons.
Yeah.
Expand your creative horizons.
people
Yeah, we gotta like have
yeah.
somebody else here to, you know.
Did you want to invite me on to rub it in my face that people like your podcast better than mine?
I mean, I will be honest. That comment was a little exciting.
There's been several comments like that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Hell
It's fine.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing your podcast now?
Today was 188.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
A shit ton.
I remember when it started.
Yeah.
I mean,
I talked about your first time ever on the podcast today with Dave because he brought up a similar story. Do you remember your first time on it?
No.
You don't?
Like, I remember we were talking about
We're
Caesar
only on
Milan.
it like maybe
Twice, yeah.
Twice? Yeah. You don't remember the first one?
We talked about Caesar Milan with Krista.
That would have been the second one, I think.
Okay, what was the first one?
Remember, it was right after Canine Intervention came out.
Canine Intervention. Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
what is canine
The
intervention?
Netflix.
Callie Canine's show.
Callie
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we were gonna have. I think it was either you and Emily or you and Krista and me and Josh. I don't remember which two it was. But I remember you came on, right, and you like we all watched the show the day before because it just came out, and then we were going to talk about it, and we got through the whole episode, and you said so little.
Yeah.
And then we hit end, and as soon as we hit end, you pulled out, you had like a list of questions and topics you had to talk about. And I was like, Bridget. So we hit go again.
Yeah.
And we restarted the
I was trying to be demure.
Demure.
Oh my god!
But Josh told me he has one of his, or not Josh, I keep saying Josh. Dave told me one of his trainers he has right now, he just had like do a video with him for the first time, and he told me the exact same thing happened to him, which is what sparked it.
It's all nervous.
Yeah.
Were you nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look at where you come now. You're 80. Now you've talked for 60 hours.
I know. Now you're hosting a podcast.
I think, yeah.
That's exciting.
The car video.
What's the car video? I don't know this
what
one.
you're talking about, actually.
Yeah, it's like one of the first videos I made, and I'm like so stiff. I'm standing there, and like, this is how to do it. And Krista was just like on the other side, like probably gonna make some rude comment to me, and it was so stressful. And that video is absolutely terrible, and it's still up on our page. If you go back,
I love the old videos. I love them. Even like I can't remember the first video I made, but I remember when I really started like making videos for the first time, and I just did it like back then. It was like Sean and Jeff and Tyler and like all of them were the ones making all the social media content, and all of it was like, "What's up, guys?"
Oh yeah, yeah, the selfie
Look
style.
at this dog right here. Yeah, so let's talk about this today.
That was a different era.
Yeah.
The Sean O'Shea era of dog training, social media was wild.
Okay, this is funny. I will contribute a little bit to the podcast here and say that Paige told me.
Yeah, because you've been a dud this whole time.
I know,
Yeah.
I
No, I'm just kidding.
Sucked, guys. Paige, what you said, you had sent her some topics to talk about or something, and one of the topics I remember Paige saying that you sent was like growing with the industry. I think like this general concept of growing with the industry. And the first thing that popped in my head when Paige said that was, do you remember like, okay, so when I first started really getting into this was whatever. We'll just start when I started my first company. So 10 years ago. Right. And I remember that was the era of bed stay, come down, come bed, this, that. And 100% of your time you spent with the dog was like place cot to recall to downstay to place cot to recall to downstay.
Yeah.
And I even look at, and when I can't, you'll have to tell me if when you started doing send homes, if it was like this also, but all of our send homes used to be, we would teach the owners how to do that whole routine.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a bed stay, and then we taught them how to recall from a bed to a bed, and then from a bed to a down. And just because that was at the time what every fucking dog trainer on the planet did. Like, it just like they portrayed it to be the most important aspect of dog training.
Yeah.
And the first thing that popped in my head when I saw that is look at how far, forget us, but look at how far the industry, at least the good parts of the industry, have come from that point to highlighting the things that really fucking matter, which is getting these dogs out into the real world, working on real specific problems that actually apply to your day-to-day.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
That's my contribution. I have nothing else to say.
It was, that time, like, I even remember that when I was taught to do things initially, we never went above a level 1. Now,
there was a reason for that.
Yeah.
At that point, we were predominantly relying on food to train a lot of those things, food and leash. So the level 1 was basically to start at the absolute lowest level where something's actually happening, but because the food's doing all the work, we could work on our mechanics as a handler.
Okay.
And also to make sure that we were consistently running into problems at that point where we would go up a little too fast and kill all the food drive and then need to reset back down. So basically at that stage, the negative reinforcement we were doing with the e-collar was basically pointless. You could have just removed it and then just jumped right into just using corrections once you moved on to that stage. But yes, that was obviously something that we did.
Yeah, I remember those days. It was very confusing.
I think at the beginning of anyone's dog training career, it's confusing.
Yeah.
Because you end up doing a lot of things that like you're just told to do, and you're not quite fully comprehending why you're doing them or the like reasoning behind a lot of it. So you tend to get swept up, I think, in a lot of like stylistic things, depending on like who you're learning under or who you're watching the most. That truly, I feel like that you can only really develop like a thorough understanding of it if you just do it and you do it for a while.
Yeah.
And you learn from like multiple different people and
Multiple
like stuff
different
like
dogs,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. I think like most dog trainers start out the very, very, very beginning as positive only, like, or pro positive. Like I was definitely like that when I started here. Like I came from a shelter environment. I never, had any experience with that. And I was like, I came here and I was like, oh, they put e-collars on the dogs. And I was like, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah.
And then I remember like giving a bath to this dog and it was freaking the fuck out in the tub, like flailing and everything. And then David came over and he picked like one thing that the dog was like doing, like putting her paws up, and the dog was absolutely perfect for the rest of the bath and was like relaxed and fine. And I was like, oh, punishment works.
Yes. And that's interesting because I was a client of dog training before I like got into being a dog trainer.
Yeah.
Like I trained horses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when I got Cash as like an adult, and he was awful, I like had to figure out how to train him because the similarities between training horses and dogs, a lot of the concepts are the same.
Yeah.
But because you're dealing with like a prey mindset versus like a predator mindset, like the motivations behind why they do stuff and certain things is like very different. So there were like certain pieces and parts that weren't connecting for me. So when I went through training, like I ended up going through like a positive only trainer first. I just think they're more immediately accessible and the price points are always lower.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's why people start there, is because it's cheaper and it
Sounds
seems
good.
like,
why wouldn't you want to use food and like never have to punish your dog? And
yeah. Well, and I didn't really know the dynamics of like force-free dog training, balanced dog training. Like that was never a thing to me because like with horses, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
These days there is now. Now there's this weird like positive only horse training movement, which like good luck. You're going to get kicked and killed one of these days. When I see some of these horses that people are training using like positive methods, I'm like, that's the most dangerous animal I've ever seen in my life. But it wasn't really a thing. Like punishment or like negative reinforcement really with horses is like the main way. You do some positive reinforcement and stuff, but the main way you interact with them, like spatial pressure, stuff like that. So when I got into dog training, I was just like, first dog trainer I saw, I was like, sure, I'll give it a go.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and then after like one session, I was like, this is a joke. Like there's no way this is going to do anything.
The clicker training class.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I did another trainer who was like very yank and crank, like old style training. So like choke chain and stuff like that. And conversely with that training, I was like, there's gotta be like a middle ground.
Yeah.
Like there's gotta be something that's in the middle. Cause that training just seemed to like exacerbate him and made it worse because it just antagonized him. And then I found like reasonable e-collar training and I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. And so that was kind of like my introduction into learning that there's like a vast variety of different ways that people train dogs, some wildly more effective than others.
Yes.
I don't know if I agree that most people start as positive only trainers, though. I think most owners start with positive only training.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like just based on what I've seen, that most people start training dogs as balance, call it balance, call it whatever you want, trainers, because it's quicker to get results so they can get into it faster. And I think the problem is you have two avenues that they'll go down. You have ones that generally will like become balanced dog trainers and work somewhere where the balanced dog training is just done very poorly, which turns them off of balanced dog trainers or training and then transitions them into going like polar opposite, force free. Or I feel like you have the ones that wind up just going and like working for themselves and either excelling at it and becoming good or just like never really learn from their mistakes and stay not great with it.
Well, I think it depends on where you're indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Like you were in the rescue
world for sure.
Yeah.
So like you definitely probably were like getting all the maybe not even subliminal messaging, just straight up messaging.
Straight up messaging. At two different filters too. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like it especially if you just go into the dog training world with very little experience and you don't have like outside influences convincing you one way or the other. Even if you don't think you're using punishment to train, you are.
Yeah.
If you're using leash pressure and you're pulling your dog, you're using negative reinforcement. You're using. So, yeah, I think that even people that claim to be, there's no way to be fully force free.
Yeah.
It's that in and of itself is kind of a lie.
I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, there's no way to really know the answer for it. I don't know. I mean, like I said, positive reinforcement is so accessible to your average owner, you know, and it's so easy to get into it. And it's like common knowledge. You get a dog, you teach them shit with a cookie, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like most owners then transition to realizing the limitation. Like they'll either find that their dog's pretty easy and it works well for them. And they're like, oh, I'm a great dog trainer. I'm a positive only trainer, you know? Or like I said, they see the limitations in it. They seek out balanced dog training. And then they go that route. But I feel like the percentage of ones that the positive reinforcement approach works with, where they turn into positive only trainers, I feel like would be lower than that of the ones that need further help. And most dog trainers are created from owners that had dogs that seeked out training to, you know, help their situation. I don't know.
And it's interesting to think about too. I wonder, because I'd be interesting to know the statistics on like how many more force-free dog training businesses there are versus like balance training. Because I feel like, I don't know, this is a very unformed thought, so I'm speaking as I'm thinking it.
Form it.
But it feels like with like force-free trainers, like you go down the street, you know, like a random force-free trainer, and it doesn't work. But nothing catastrophic really happens.
No.
So you like don't leave reviews. You just move on to the next thing, you know, whatever. You're like,
They're
yeah,
nice
they were
enough.
nice.
Yeah.
Like that, I hear that all the time of like, yeah, we did force-free training. They were nice, you know, it just whatever. But like, if you have a bad experience with like balance training, everyone's gonna fucking know about it. and I do think it's like unavoidable to say, as somebody who uses punishment in training, that like if you use punishment incorrectly, the effects are more of adverse than if you use positive reinforcement incorrectly, or it looks worse, like on the dog.
I think that's the key. You know,
Like
we
with
know how hard
positive-
it is to create like long lasting like problems with a dog. But in the moment, having a
looks
dog
worse.
throwing a tantrum over something or you know, kind of shutting down a little bit because you were too hard on them and stuff. Yeah. Like those are the things that, especially when you have owners that have such an emotional attachment to their dogs, understandably so, like we're owners as well. Right. That is going to leave a much more sour taste in the mouth than the trainer just not being able to get the dog under control because they're just using treats. You know?
Which is crazy because reinforcement used improperly creates so many more long-term issues than punishment that's
Tell
used
us about it,
improperly.
Michelle. Tell us.
Reinforcement is so much more powerful than punishment, really, when you're trying to create habits.
Yeah.
So like if somebody's just using cookies and they're using their timing is really shitty and they're trying to train a reactive dog, when you're using, even if you're using like negative reinforcement, when you're using a version of reinforcement and you're doing it wrong, you're creating way more lasting behaviors that are like way harder to get rid of than if you just use punishment incorrectly one or two times.
Dig a little deeper.
Why don't you dig a little deeper?
Well, no, I'm curious where you're getting with it.
It's like those trainers.
Is it not making sense what I'm saying?
Just elaborate a little.
is.
I think I kind of get where you're going with it.
Yeah. I think that because like the nature of reinforcement is that it creates like a feel good effect for a dog.
And
Sure.
for the people.
Yeah, and for the people that the dog wanting to repeat behaviors that get them reinforcement.
Sure.
I mean, that's the definition of it, right? Punishment, you're trying to eliminate something.
Yeah.
So if you're, I guess we'll take the reactive dog. When you take your dog on a walk and they're pulling on the leash.
Yes.
And then they get to pee on the bush.
Yes.
And then they get to get petted by people.
Yes.
And then they get to go see the dog. You're creating lasting
Yeah,
behaviors
yeah.
that are so hard to reverse
Yes.
long term because the reinforcement they're getting
Yeah.
behind it is so
Yeah.
strong.
I 100% agree and understand what you're saying. I guess the reason why I was asking you to dig a little deeper into it is because I wanted to know if you were going more that route or going the route that you hear a lot of trainers say, which is like, oh, by giving your dog treats while they're reacting, you're going to make the dog want to react
No.
more, which
No.
we know you may reinforce the act of pulling more, right?
Not
or
the
you
feeling.
but like the feeling of reacting, like you're not going to make the dog be like, oh my God, because I got these treats, I want to get more sad and angry because
So you
of
wanted
that.
to see if I was stupid or not?
Yeah.
Well, I actually
Is that what you're
well, you know
getting
what
at?
it was is I kind of for a minute I was like, she's not thinking that, but
You're
I
like,
actually no
"She's not that
for a
dumb."
second though. I was being dumb because I did not
Yeah.
think of the alternative, which was what you just described.
Yes. Yes.
So that was me being stupid, Michelle.
Wow.
Wow.
What a moment.
Did you
Did
like
everybody
that?
hear that? You heard it here
You guys
first.
like that? That's why they have the better podcast.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, that's what I was trying to
No,
get
no,
at.
that was a good way of articulating it.
Yeah. Like a little bit of reinforcement goes a much longer way than a little bit of punishment, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like, I think I brought this up a couple months ago, but I was watching a video with Balance Trainer, and she's like, I don't use food in my training because it makes the dogs too excited.
Oh, we talked about this one just like an hour ago
Yeah.
also.
So,
Wait, hold on.
guess
Let me give
maybe-
the phrase. Is the food helping or hurting? I
Is that
hear
what she
a lot.
said?
No, I don't know who she's talking about, but I've heard trainers say that specifically. Is this food
hypes them up
helping
too
or
much.
hurting?
It's like, you don't know how to utilize food.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're trying to train.
Yeah.
There are moments when I wouldn't use food with dogs, depending
for sure.
on what I'm trying to train in the context.
Give us an example.
Crate drills. I don't use food.
Yeah.
For like, say the dog is having issue, not like going in and out of the crate. Sure, with a young puppy, you
But,
can
like,
use food
being
going
calm
in,
and then,
being
like,
calm in
going
the crate,
interrupting
and then
that.
throwing food in there as a reward
See,
for calming
Wait,
and
hold
settling.
on. This is another place where I was being stupid
thought I
because
was
I
being
thought for a
dumb?
minute getting in the crate, I was like, why the fuck would she use food for that?
Wow, guys, David really thinks highly of me. He really thinks I'm a great dog
And then
trainer.
when you said being calm in the crate, actually 100%
Yeah,
agree
like
with that. Because that's not what we're not worried about a physical thing.
No.
We're worried about an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And in that context, it's not like, just like you can't reinforce the emotion of the dog being, anxiously aggressive towards another dog in that context, you also can't really, at least actually, I don't have the data to prove this, right? And I'm sure there's a study out there that might say, agree with me or say otherwise, but I don't think that you could use food to reinforce the mental state of being calm.
no,
either.
because if the dog is excited by food, you just
Yes.
ruined it.
Yes.
Yeah.
By introducing
Yes.
food.
Yeah.
So
they're
like,
just like, they want more.
exactly. Yeah, because like if I'm teaching, like with Lumos, like when I was teaching him to like settle as a puppy and his food drive is like through the roof, and he finally lays down and relaxes, and then I'm like, good, and I give him
Yeah.
food, then we've started all over again.
Yeah.
And then now he's
Yeah.
bonkers.
I think like another area people always misuse food, like which I've heard you say, is like you don't use it for potty training. Like you don't
Yeah.
reward.
Yeah, I
the
don't
dog
use
is-
it
well,
for potty
because
training.
going is positively reinforced. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that you can't. I mean, you can, but
The
like,
negative
it's
reinforcement
very
of it.
unnecessary.
Yeah.
Because like you're uncomfortable when you have to pee, and then when you
Yes.
pee, you feel better. That's your negative reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And people tend to use food incorrectly.
Yes.
With potty training, they wait until they get all the way back inside, and then they give the dog food. So now your dog just recognizes coming into the house is
Yeah.
what gets me a snack.
Yeah.
And then you have those dogs that like want to be let out to turn around and come right back in because they just want a treat.
I was watching maybe a year ago, one of Jeff Gelsman's lives that he does. And I never watched the lives. I'll listen to the replays and stuff, but I never watched the lives. And he was talking about something in it about like food as a punishment or a negative or this or that. And I left this comment on it that I thought was hilarious. It was like, well, technically speaking, giving a dog food is negative reinforcement because the dog is hungry, and giving the food is alleviating the hunger.
Oh my gosh. Depending on how hungry they are, I suppose.
Right?
I suppose. The same way that petting a dog who doesn't want to be pet is positive punishment. There's plenty of dogs that I like. Little Noodle that I'm working with right now. He's this little Shih Tzu Bichon thing. Hates being touched by people he doesn't know. So when I'm training him and I'm telling him good job, if I pet him, that's aversive to him. So that's not probably the best thing I should be doing in those contexts. Does he need to get used to physical touch? Yes, but don't use physical touch as a reward.
To your point, Bridget, the whole idea of like we don't use food because it gets the dogs too riled up. Again, if we're talking something like, you used a good example of the crate, right, where that emotional state of mind, but past just the emotional state of mind, I think when you're looking at something like a crate, what is the actual picture we're trying to train is the dog not being dependent on the human, and the human providing things, I think does more harm than good. I think the only workaround to that, or the only exception I could possibly think of, is if you used one of those treat dispenser things, you know, in the crate, that actually would probably be then an appropriate use of food for something like that. But it's, again, it's unnecessary. But
like an indirect reward.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is funny because I did think about, I had a client with a Doberman that was working through crate issues.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, why can't I think of her name? I don't remember the dog's name, but it was that man. I think you talked to him a couple times and did
the doctor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like so into it.
Yes.
Like he was one of those clients that like wanted to do all the fun, like little extra things that you would give them.
Yeah.
Like the higher level stuff. And so we talked about using the treat and train for it, and he actually got one. Nice. And he did a little bit of it, and it worked pretty well. But
yeah, in that context, I think the problem is less with the emotional state of mind you're creating and more on the dependency of the human, because the crate problems you're trying to resolve is the dog doesn't like being separated from the human. So if we're getting them dependent on us coming back and providing a reward, it's further exacerbating that problem, where something like a treat and train would be getting the dog then truly seeking enjoyment out of us not being present, right?
Yeah. But when people say that like they don't like using food because it gets the dog too excited, I just hear they don't know how to control arousal levels.
Yeah, I mean, come on, we see obviously like use something like agility, which is obviously predominantly force free because you're teaching things, not stopping things, and you look at how jacked up those dogs get to work for whatever type of reinforcement they're getting, whether it's food or a toy or anything like that, and those dogs can control themselves perfectly fine for that reward. Because the thing is, if you're telling me that the dog is so excited to get that treat that we cannot get them to be compliant, that tells me the dog doesn't know what they need to do to access the reward.
Yeah.
Because if they want it that bad, as soon as they realize, oh, I just do this and I get this, of course they're going to do it. And they're going to do it with more enthusiasm than if you weren't using the food.
Yeah. Control and arousal are not like mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Like they can go together extremely well.
Yeah. It's like when we were taking the scent work class and both of our dogs had the issue of like the cardboard box
destroying the,
and they were like,
the
if your dog destroys a cardboard box, you're eliminated in the trial.
Yeah.
And then both of our dogs just
meanwhile they're just like launching them across the room.
And they're like, you can't do that. And you're like, well, how do I stop him? And they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, like I was like, okay, like what is your advice on how to control his arousal level when he's doing it? Because he was so enthusiastic about it. He was pumped. And they couldn't give me like any insight on it.
So that's an interesting point. You could dissect a little bit and say, all right, well, we just said 2 seconds ago that, you know, if the dog is that motivated for food, you shouldn't need it. You should just be able to teach them what to do to access the food. That would kind of be an exception though, because you would have to ask the question of, is the dog destroying the cardboard box because they're trying to figure out how to get the thing you have? Or is the act of destroying the cardboard box that reinforcing to them that it has nothing to do with them accessing your reward? It has to do with them accessing the reward of destroying the cardboard box, which in that case, you would need punishment for it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What I ended up doing, if anyone's curious, to solve that problem.
I'm curious.
Was I had to get better at... I did more drills of me knowing where the scent was. I didn't do blind...
Yeah, or pair.
Blind, yeah.
Pairing.
I didn't do blind stuff anymore because my issue was if I didn't know, I wasn't confident enough as a handler yet to where if I didn't know where the scent was, that I was confident rewarding him super quick at his first tells because I was like, maybe he's not right. Maybe let me give him a little bit of extra time. So what I ended up doing was doing more where I knew where the scent was. So as soon as he indicated, I rewarded him before he got too intense with it.
Yeah. So it's coming from you rather than like the cardboard box.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I think they made the mistake of pairing a little bit too much. So the food was in the box and the dog got used to.
Well, that was it.
Yes.
So that would be the example of like I described. In your case, he was trying to find the reward in the box.
Yes.
Right? It wasn't just that the act of tearing up the box obviously was that self-reinforcing.
And I mean, I think in their defense, like they were very much used to working with like more traditional scent dogs. And I brought in like a Dutchie.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh...
Well, I think
that's a little intense.
The other thing too, back when we used to do quite a bit of like narcotics detection training back at Heights, and that was more Jake's avenue than mine, but nonetheless, like I was around it a lot. I got to work a couple dogs on it, and the biggest difference between like high level Nosework trainers and more I don't want to use the word novice Nosework trainers,
like
but more
fun.
casual, fun Nosework trainers and stuff is high level ones that are doing like explosives detection, narcotics detection, stuff like that. They put so much more emphasis on training the indication specifically before ever going to doing searching work. So like we would never even go and do a search until we have taught the dog that no longer is the reward coming from the source, right? And two, that the indication has nothing to do with actually touching the odor, right?
And they were against that because I asked them.
Did
I
they
said,
say why?
Well, I asked them. I don't know that they ever gave me a good reason because I was like, well, if I teach him an indicator, wouldn't that help this problem?
Yeah.
I said, because he's basically, I'm just going off of what he decides is his indicator rather than teaching
100%.
something. And they were like, well, we don't really encourage that because do you remember
it
why
takes time off of it can take time off of the stopwatch. So like when you're competing, you're wanting to be in the top 4, you want to place.
Yeah.
So having a dog like indicate, like, you remember the Beaucerons?
Yes.
And she'd have them like lay down and put their chin down on the ground. That took like 4 extra seconds.
Yeah.
So if you're really interested in competing, you want your dog to find it and you want to read your dog like immediately on the scent.
I would argue that that's like, okay, so if, it doesn't need to be a complex indication.
Yeah, but even just like
not knowing what the indication is, then you have to guess, right? And you could either then have false positives where you're guessing wrong and that wasn't the indication because you never taught them anything.
Yeah.
Or you're waiting way too long because you're second guessing, is that an indication or is that not an indication?
Well, I think part of it was less that like you were getting different indications from the dog. It was more they wanted you to learn your dog and figure out like, oh, because there was even one part where she even like pointed out with Lumos, she's like, did you see how he like turned his head that little way? Like that's his tell. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
well, that means he caught on to something.
Yeah, but I'm like,
I don't know.
I feel like I would be far more confident if he knew to like sit.
Yeah.
When
and
he
like
found
really, like
something,
I would argue it takes like a quarter of a second for them to like stabilize on the indication.
But again, I think the difference is, as Bridget pointed out, is that these are people training for fun competitions versus like don't blow up the car or the bomb. You know what I mean? So like time is not necessarily a concern when you're trying to find drugs or explosives or things like that.
The more you do it, like the better you get at reading your dog.
What is this? Is that something you guys do?
Yeah.
Oh, are we allowed to go? Are we allowed to go over 5 minutes?
Yeah, because we only have our
We have our trainers meeting next. We'll just do the trainers meeting live on the podcast. Guys, let's talk about all of our
man.
trials and tribulations. Tribulations. I just said that. What word was I looking for?
Tribulations.
That's the one.
Yeah.
No, I don't have a good
tribulations.
vocabulary, guys. Sorry.
Oh,
Sometimes I make up
what
words.
was the one word you didn't know the other day?
I don't remember.
Hyperbolic.
No, that wasn't it, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was hyperbolic. Paige, remember?
Still don't remember what it is. Hyperbole. No, it's
Hyper-
hyperbole specifically was the word.
Yeah, but they're the same word. They're just different
See,
versions.
but here's the thing. I'm an idiot. So hyperbolic and hyperbole sound like two different words.
They're just different endings. Bridget, do you know
Are
what
you guys still
hyperbolic
doing your-
is?
Hyperbolic.
Yeah.
I could probably give a really terrible answer.
Yeah, but don't do that because that's the problem, right? If you don't know the word, you don't know the word.
Yeah.
It was like a cautionary tale he just gave you. But don't do that.
But don't do that. Wait, are you guys still go to the Nosework classes or just the trials now?
I just go to
Bridget
the
does.
trials.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sign up for classes again, probably next month.
Yeah.
But
What does she have any of the titles yet? Has she done enough trials to get the title?
she has her advanced scent work title. She has her novice scent work title. So
In
now,
what avenue?
all of them. So
All of 'em? So, like-
Interior, exterior, container, buried.
Nice.
So now we're going to go to, I think it's Elite or Masters is next.
That's cool.
And Masters is like you have to time. You get 2 minutes, and they don't tell you how many hides there are. So you have to tell them when your dog is done and when you think they found all the hides, which is really difficult.
Yeah, that would be hard. Because then you have to get the dog to leave what they've already found and
Yeah.
like keep looking for other ones.
Yeah.
Which I bet that's difficult.
So yeah,
Nice.
we're going to a seminar next month too.
Who's
So,
teaching the seminar?
Tony Gravely.
I don't know if I've heard
I think
of
I
him.
remember them talking about that when we
But I don't know a
when I
lot
used
of
to
the
do
like
classes.
competitive scent work people. So you should look into Dave Croyer's scent work class. Just familiarize yourself with it a little bit.
Okay.
It's really interesting. I mean, that's the system that most of the police cannons and stuff use. So I just think the way he broke stuff down and his DVDs that he had, these were a long time ago he came out with them, but they were so good.
Some work is fun.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those like dog sports that it's very accessible to like a whole level of
Yeah.
like
Yeah, there's like
experience.
Chihuahuas and then
Yeah, like
the
every dog has a
trials.
nose
yeah.
usually, but and that way you can like any experience level too.
Yeah.
Like even if your dog doesn't get to the point where they're competing at like super high levels, like it's still like a fun little thing to do with them.
Yes. But the behavior at the trials is a little crazy sometimes. Like me and my friend Paige were just watching like people get pulled down, like these older ladies just getting yanked and like dogs barking nonstop.
Yeah.
Well, it's like agility. I mean, agility
Oh,
is
those dogs
notorious
are
for
so
in
out of
between the
control.
trials. You see them so under control, but like in between them, like most of these dogs are like trying to attack other dogs, like going bananas and stuff.
Yeah. And they do kind of to a degree want that level of hype going into
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're definitely the concern of suppressing the drive.
That freaking Dalmatian in the class that would like nonstop bark and she'd be like, shut up.
She would spray with a spray bottle. It was so funny
She
because
threatened to spray it with a spray
yeah,
bottle.
she was so against like corrections and things, but then instead of just correcting her dog, she'd just scream at it from across the room or
Yeah.
walk over and spray it or threaten to spray it or make other people do it.
Yeah,
That was the
yeah,
best
she
part.
did
Love it.
She'd be like, somebody go grab the bottle. Just hold it up in front of him.
Grab the bottle. Oh boy, what a time to be alive.
People will do anything to avoid just correcting their dog.
Yeah,
So silly.
yeah. Awesome. Wow.
any
Thank you
last
guys. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Maybe
Sure this
you'll
was the
boost our
highlight of your week.
ratings.
Probably not.
They'll be like, wow, David's on this episode. Skip.
Yeah.
See ya.
So when are we going on your podcast?
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about that the other day.
It's been a while.
Let's do it.
I haven't been on the podcast since I started working here. Only when I didn't work here.
Yeah.
That was the only time.
Oh, yeah. We didn't do it together, did we?
Oh yeah, you never did come out on post that.
Nope. Or wait, did I?
Did we do one together?
I don't know.
Wait, did I? I think I did actually. Now I'm
You know,
having
when you do
flashbacks.
188 episodes of podcasting, sometimes you lose track.
I think I did actually.
When
I
you're
think we
just
may have done. We'll have to do another one though.
A suburban white woman with a microphone.
Yes.
Let's do it, guys. That'd be great.
All right. Well,
Right.
All right, that's it. See ya.
thanks. Bye.